All right, I think that we are ready to begin. I'd like to call this meeting to order at 2:02 p.m. Second item, I guess, on the agenda, roll call. I will be doing the roll call as presented in the posted agenda. Nidia Bello, Dr. Ed Bond. Do we need to say present on each one? Yeah, please just unmute yourself and go ahead, even though we can see you. Cynthia Carrillo.
Present.
Mary Doan.
Present.
Dr. Elizabeth Garcia.
Present.
Fabiola Gomez. Jerry Mead.
Present.
Todd McWhirter.
Present.
John Marquez. We can note him as present, but muted. Dr. David Moore.
Present.
Lorenzo Maraza.
Present.
Kevin Olson.
Present.
Mark Robertson.
Present.
Yilda Sanchez. I think she is on, but she is muted. So we'll note her as present. Myself, Dr. Daniel Sandoval, present. Dan Singer. And Jeffrey Weinstein.
Present.
Okay. Could we all stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Hand over your heart. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Item 1D, approval of the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
So moved.
Do I hear a second? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed?
Aye.
All right, motion passes. 1E, approval of the minutes. Hopefully, people were able to peruse those. I would like to entertain any motions.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Do I hear a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing no discussion, we will go ahead and vote. All those in favor of approving the minutes? Oh, Todd, do you have
No,
a?
I was saying aye.
You're ahead of me. All those in favor of approving the minutes, say aye
Aye.
or raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
All those, anyone disapprove? Hearing no dissensions, the motion passes.
Just a point of order, Dr. Sandoval. I just wanted to let everybody know that that's one of the reasons why we record the meeting. So a recording of the meeting then goes to my executive secretary, who then transcribes the meeting into meeting minutes and everything and tries to make sure it's as accurate as possible. So we want to thank Maricela for doing that for us.
Yes, very much so. She had to listen to this whole thing in detail. So item number 2, public comments. Members of the public may submit written comments by noon of the day of the scheduled meeting to mgarcia@santapaulausd.org. These comments will be read aloud into the record. Members of the public may also wish to read their own comments by phone or Zoom by submitting a request to Santapaulausd.org no later than noon on the day of the scheduled meeting. A link to join the meeting to personally present your comment will be sent to you prior to the start of the meeting. Please limit written and oral remarks to 3 minutes for all presentations unless otherwise informed. We do have public comments, at least from John Proctor. So I will give him the floor.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Thank you, excuse me, Dr. Sandoval. My name's John Proctor. I'm a Santa Paula resident. First, I want to applaud the process that you're going through and tell you that I certainly don't envy you. My comment's a little off point for today's topic, so I'll be really brief. I'm speaking as a board member of De Coloris Multicultural Folk Arts. We want to let you know that as you proceed with this process, that we stand in great support of music and arts in our schools. We had a great meeting with Dr. Moore, and we're pleased to hear that he's going to do an assessment of those programs throughout the district. We look forward to those findings and stand ready to support you and help you realize your goals for those programs. I've taken enough of your time. Thank you for your time, and I'll let you get back to the business at hand. Good luck.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comments? All right, hearing no others, we will move to item 3A, grade configurations in the district. So here we go. All right, first, I wanted to kind of set the stage a little bit. We have a lot to talk about, and we have something to achieve, right? I just wanted to quickly review the process, right, that we're going to go through today. The first off is that I did send out a short document that reviewed, kind of consolidated the options and ordered them and categorized them in what I felt was, some sort of logical order. We're going to quickly review that. After that, the idea will be for all voting members, right, to actually vote on their top 3 choices. This is not to say these are the ones we're going with. It's to eliminate any options that, the group just feels like we don't really need to discuss, so that we can pare down the conversation to those options that we think are most viable or most interesting to ourselves, to the group. We will take time to discuss each of the remaining options. Then we will take a second vote to see which 3 options, or maybe 2, right? If it's clear that there's only 2, but the intent is 3 options that we will carry forward to, further discuss with collaborative partners, and to review, any data that we might need to help us make to help the board make a final decision. And so then I just wanted to comment, there was a tremendous amount of activity on our document over the last 2 weeks, which was great. There is a lot of information there. There are going to be some things that we're not going to be able to get to today to talk to thoroughly. All right, just know that at some point we will get to all of that information. Today, the goal is, and hopefully we can achieve it, to have 3 viable grade configurations, right, that we can move forward, right? It doesn't mean that, we're going to have everything figured out, right? But we will have a good idea as to where we think we need to go. So with that said, if you will indulge me just a bit, I wanted to show the document that I set out. And again, I want to kind of frame our thinking a bit. And, if anybody has a comment or a question or what have you, please stop me, right? I'm going to go over this fairly quickly because we need to just stop
Dr.
listening to me.
Sandoval,
Yes.
thank you for going over the process, but I believe that once this group arrives at maybe prioritizing the top 3, the idea then would be that the community, then the schools would participate in providing somewhat of either a town hall or some kind of a discussion to further maybe arrive at maybe reducing the 3 to 2 or maybe 1. Is that also a part of this process?
Well, we will absolutely be soliciting comment from, from the public, right, and from staff and teachers and all those who really want to lend their voice to making this decision. I don't know if we would narrow it down, because at the end of the day, it's the board's decision. But I can speak at least for myself, and probably the rest of the board, right, that we want that comment, that feedback, that we won't make this decision in isolation of that feedback. And so hopefully we will have some time at the end to talk a little bit about what we would expect in that feedback process. So yes, so the answer to the question is yes.
Thank you.
So as I was reviewing the documents, right, the document and all the comments, to me, it seemed like it came down to really kind of three questions. All right, the first is about K-8s. Are we going to have any, right? Are we going to have none? Are we going to have some, right? The second is around Isabel, right? Are we going to keep it a middle school? Are we going to do a junior high, i.e. 7th, 8th? Are we going to have no middle school or junior high? Or some sort of hybrid of, splitting, say, the 6th grade and relieving some of the population from Isabel. And then finally is, do we take the elementary schools, right? And do we still have some sort of neighborhood school, K6, K5, what have you? Or do we split the grades, right, at some fashion? And I know that there was discussion on where that split should be. But in general, it's, do you want a K3, 4, 6 system, P2, 3, 5 system, some sort of split? I just wanted to make, kind of just take that pulse, right, to see if there was, agreement with that or, any discussion on that before I lay out the rest of this. That seems like a reasonable way to frame that. What I then did was essentially map the options that we were talking about within those categories, right? So that those kind of three basic questions were a bit clearer. And so at this point, right, I would suggest, at this point, what I would like from us is to kind of think about those options, right, and those scenarios. And we are going to, I'm sending out an email right now. I think that's the best way of doing this, but if you don't get the email, please let me know, right? And if you don't have access, I sent an email that has a voting sheet, right, to the voting members. So I did want to talk just quickly about voting members. As was constituted in the resolution, right, for forming this committee, right, because we do have a lot more people participating in this than there are voting members, right? I just wanted to remind us that, there is a kind of a limit on who gets to vote, right? So members of the public, right, will not get a vote. There will only be 2 cabinet members that will get a vote, although there are a number of cabinet members here. There will only be 2 board members, right, Ms. Mead and myself, that get a vote, although there are other board members here. Each community group will get its own vote, right, even though there might be more than one representative from a community vote. And so, I just wanted to make sure that we're all aware. So when we see that document, there's no confusion as to, who gets the vote. I would welcome any comments at this time, but if not, there aren't any comments, I would like for you to open up that document and please pick 3 of the options that you think warrant further discussion, that you think are the best, right, for us to go through. And so the idea of this is to see if there are some options that no one really wants so that we don't have to take the time. Todd, please.
Are we just putting like a number 1 there if that's an option? Like
Yeah,
we can
a
put
one or
a
an
1 and
extra.
up to, well, it looks like you did a sum at the bottom, right? So if we put a 1, will that add up the votes?
It's a count. So
A count.
you can
Okay.
put a
so
one. and
Any character, any
Yes.
character. Thank you.
So let's take a few minutes.
I think Mary had her hand up as well.
Oh yeah, sorry, Mary, please.
That's okay. I just want to make sure because of the document you showed just a minute ago and took down, before I vote, these that are on the Budget Advisory Committee membership or the voting document have not changed from what was on the survey, correct? We're not
Correct.
changing anything.
When-
Okay,
when
so
I-
they're
just-
the same, like option 1 is still what was on that,
Yes,
the document.
Yes.
Okay, all
I
right.
did put a small description of each one to help kind of jog our memories,
Right.
right? And then just to let you know, the document I did send, there were 2 extra options that seemed to fall out of the comments. Those options are not on this list since we did not have a chance to discuss those, right? But they are flavors of options that are already there. So, Todd.
So it seems to me that there would be a possibility that our current configuration would be a good configuration, but I don't see that as a choice.
That was option 0, I think, on that sheet that you showed.
Yeah,
us.
if there's no dissension, right, on putting that up there, we certainly can. Although I kind of think that that's, and again, you feel free to disagree. It seems like when we go out and discuss things, you know, that's kind of inherently an option that people will say, well, we don't like any 3 of these, let's keep it the same. But if we want to make that an explicit option to vote for, I can add that column right now. So
I just think it, not that I think it's my favorite or it's one I would pick, but I do think if we're picking 3, like for me, I think there would bear a reasonable amount of discussion on the current configuration. And that would, just for me, I don't know if it would be my top one, but I think it would certainly be one of my top 3.
Is there any, does anybody have any objection to adding an option 0 as the status quo?
I don't.
Okay, I'll add that right now to the worksheet.
Dr. Sandoval, excuse me, do we have options to edit? Because I'm trying to click to enter my vote and I'm not able to enter anything into the field.
It
Mr.
says view
Olson.
only in the top alt left.
See if I can fix that.
Thank you.
I can claim that
Oh, I
this
see.
one
It
was,
says view only now. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, so should C, the first one, be option 0 then, or option? Because option 2 is E. Yeah, there we go. Okay, thank you.
at fingers.
It's okay, it happens.
Give me a second, sorry.
Yeah, I'm still not.
'Cause
able
I
to-
shared it with Daniel, and then Daniel shared it with you, so it
It's
looks a little
okay.
different from my perspective now, not like it normally is, as far as the sharing goes. I only see Daniel on. Editors can change permissions and share viewers, download and print. Come on.
Daniel, I have a question.
There we go. Try refreshing it and see if you have permission to edit now.
So who had a question?
Jerry,
Jerry did, yes?
mine's not, I'm trying to get the email on my phone and it's not loading. Can I just send you my vote on a text or a?
Yeah, go ahead, if you can, oh, yeah, sure. Go ahead and text.
Okay.
Hmm,
That, Mr. Sandoval, I'm not able to get in with my vote. I said, I went to view only and then I'm requesting change, but I can't get in.
Go ahead, close that and then open it again. That should have been changed.
To refresh it, it opens it up.
Dr. Sandoval,
Yes.
I noticed that you've got 7 and 7B, but 7B is not, you don't have it as an option.
I did mention that there were two options that were kind of flavors of
Oh, I
things that
see.
came from the comments, and I didn't put those because we didn't have a chance to comment on them.
Oh,
But we could bring that to the discussion,
I
right,
see.
if it's similar. So Mary, do you have a further question?
Oh, I'm sorry, no, except I'm
Okay.
noticing that if people put an X, it doesn't contribute to the total, so.
Yeah, even though it's a count, it looks like you need to put a 1.
Okay, I'll put a 1.
Can I put a
I'm
2?
an Excel guy.
And the PK split is where you're talking about like the PK 3 and the 4 to 6, right?
Yes.
Yes, got it.
Just one thing to keep in mind while you're thinking about these, right? As you're finishing up your votes, is that any grade configuration that we embark on is not going to start tomorrow, right? Or when we decide. It's going to be most likely a multi-year process. So, and that's just good for the public to know, but good for us as committee members to remember that, this is a very high stakes change to, certain extents and way of thinking of it. So, it's nothing that we're going to just rush into, this will be done methodically. Is everybody done with their vote?
No.
Sorry, I think this was addressed, but was 7A and B the difference between a PK 5 and PK 6 elementary schools?
Yeah. It
So
was,
are we just
so-
gonna say that like there's flexibility as we further flesh out some of those? So like option 7 could, I mean, right now it says PK 5, but maybe upon further conversation,
yeah. So, I think, I'll just talk personally, right? Especially about that option, right? I voted for option 7, right? Even though I would rather see it as a PK 6 junior high K-8, right? So again, if you're voting, and you liked 7B, again, I made that up. I don't want to put my will on, on the group, right? But I did want us to keep that in mind. Because actually it was Jerry, I think that was the one who mentioned that option.
Yeah. Sorry, I was kind of voting and listening at the same time, so I thought that was.
Oh no, that's okay.
And
Does anybody else need any more time?
did we do a total across the users so we can make sure that everybody put 2 in?
Sure, if you could do that.
Yeah, I can do that.
And I know of one person who only has 2 votes. I don't know if they
We're
want.
putting 3, right, Kevin?
We're
Not
putting
2.
3. We're putting 3.
Oh, I'm
Okay.
sorry. I put 2. So I gotta get another 1 in there.
I'm
And I
missing
was like,
one.
oh, I did it wrong already.
Let me add
Isn't
this
it
up.
fun doing this over Zoom?
I
We're
think there
just-
are some advantages though, because we're all on computers and can put this vote in now. You know, everything has to be flexible these days, right?
Hey, you know what? Butcher paper on the walls has offered that flexibility for ages.
True, true.
All right, Jerry still has a 2 on the board. And Latino Town Hall still has a 2 on the board.
I'm trying to get to that last one. And if you don't mind, it's options 7,
7, okay,
please.
gotcha.
Yeah.
Jerry, did you need any help?
Oh, I need a lot of help. No, can I just leave it at 2?
That's up to Daniel.
That's up to you. That's one less vote for you to do. But if you just want to, that's fine too.
That's it.
This looks pretty telling to me. I think it's serving a purpose already because we've definitely, I think, knocked a few off the list, which is definitely progress.
You know, and to be completely honest, all right, while I was going through it, my assumption was that options 2, 4, and 6 were going to drop off. There didn't seem to be a lot of enthusiasm for those options. I think that, you know, we could maybe get rid of option 3 as well as something.
But three and
again,
3 and 5 are actually kind of similar, aren't they? They're both a PK split. Just one has a K8 and one has a junior high and one doesn't. I mean, they're
True.
still similar. I
True.
mean, so the concept, like Kevin was speaking about earlier, like, we kind of have a concept, but we could tweak that little concept some point down the road. So really, even if you get rid of 3, you're not really getting rid of the concept. Just like on 7, if you get rid of 7A or B, it's the same concept, I think.
So let's review this all together, since there really isn't, you know, a hard and fast process that we're doing here, right? To be completely honest, right? So again, trying to get consensus on what we're going to talk about for the next hour, right? So, you know, let's just look at number 2, 4, and 6, okay? And I brought up my little cheat sheet, right? Option 2 and 6 fall under this, you know, 4th header, right? That there are path options, but we're splitting up the 6th grade, right? So that some would be in the middle school, some would be in elementary schools. You know, this doesn't seem to be resonating with the group, right? So option 2 got 1 vote, option 4 got 0 votes. So to me, what that is saying is that this type of configuration is not something that the group thinks is worth exploring, right? So looking at option 4 is all K8s, right? No one voted on having all K8s. This seems like the type of structure that we don't want to talk about, right? There are 2, again, option 0, which is the status quo, and option 3, which are kind of in between the other 3 options. Does the group want to keep those alive for one more discussion? If it makes.
Do you want me to hide the 3 that we just
Yes.
kind of said?
Sure.
Non-starters at this point?
Sure.
Daniel, I think before, like, I think that 3 and 5 are so similar that if we take 3 out, I mean, there's still the conversation about the PK split. right? And so
Mhm.
if at some point somebody said we wanted to have a K-8 in that, like that's going to happen down the road anyways. So we could talk about that. Like, it's not like you said, it's not gonna happen tomorrow.
Right.
It would, I do see how that one would make it really a little bit crazy, right? Because it would be completely different avenues
So,
for different kids who went to the
okay.
K-8.
So
So maybe
before
that
we
is
get
the
into,
different point.
right, so before we get into the nitty gritty details, right? So I will just ask if there are any objections about, for the next, say 45 minutes, we are talking about 5 options, right? Options 0, 1, 3, 5, 7. And any variations that we might have come up again with, because again, in my estimation, right, there was an option 3B that was offered, right? And there was an option 7B that were offered, flavors of what were already there, right? So, so, all right. So,
Daniel,
yes,
I don't want to throw a curveball, but I think I feel that I need to, and that is, there's no mention here as to, and I think it might have been discussed last time, you know, the East Area 1 potential school, and because I submitted to you that I would like to see the split and have a middle school be built in East Area 1. And,
so so
so-
let me address that particular point, right? There's in my mind, there's a differentiation between the grade configuration and the site use, right? So for instance, in what you're talking about, right, you know, we, regardless of what grade configuration we came up with, right, if we still had a middle school or a junior high, we could decide later that Isabel is no longer that junior high, that we were building it out in East Area or at Harvest, right? So that possibility, right, while we need to keep it in mind, right, because we could potentially come to a grade configuration that would preclude that, right, still would be something that we could do. Another one of those instances, right, was there was a lot of talk about alternative ed, right? And so if we decide on a grade configuration, right, and we decide at some point that, say, McKevitt, right, we want to take that as our alternative ed site, that doesn't necessarily preclude us from creating, you know, a grade configuration structure, and that would be able to be something that we could do, right? It certainly is a pro and a con, right, that we can throw out there for any of the grade configurations. But I think that building anything at Harvest is a much bigger conversation that will take more work, and we need to start somewhere, right? And so we had decided we're starting with the grade configuration. So
okay.
it's not to discount. There were great ideas up there, you know, that made me really rethink how we should approach, you know, the whole, you know, picture. But I do want us to focus in on grade configuration. And again, if a grade configuration that is proposed, right, would preclude that, that's a con, right? That's something that we can raise, right? That we wouldn't be able to do something like that. So,
Thank you.
all
I have a
right.
question.
Yes.
Okay, we're talking about getting rid of option 3,
Yes.
but that's one of the few that gives parents options.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
No. Oh,
I
no.
hate-
Hold on. No. Option 3 is still on there.
I
So,
thought you
no, there was a question because it only got 3 votes. Todd made the case it should stay up there. So I was proposing that we keep it up there for discussion.
Oh, I thought you were taking it off, and I just went, wait. That's one of the few that parents would have a choice of where
Yeah.
to send their.
No, so just to make it very clear to everybody, right? Option 0 is the status quo.
Right.
Option 1 is converting or making Isabel a junior high and adding the 6th grade to all the rest of the elementary schools. Option 3 is having 2 K-8s, right? Having a junior high and having the rest of the elementary split in some way, right?
Right.
Either P2, P3,
Right,
3-6 or whatever.
right.
The option 5 is having a junior high without K-8s, right? And we split the rest of the elementary schools. Option 7 is keeping a middle school, right? Having K-8s, and then having or continuing with the PK5s.
Got it.
Okay, so
Daniel,
yes.
just because, and I agree with Todd that option 3 and 5 kind of go together a little bit. So the part that joins them at the hip is the PK6 split.
Mhm.
Maybe we should discuss the merits of that and whether or not we're willing to get on board with it or not.
So this is where, at the beginning, I feel like we have 3 fundamental questions. And so we can kind of go one of 2 ways. We could either go through each one of these options, right? Kind of look over the notes that were taken for each one of those, or we could have the kind of conversation that you're kind of alluding to, which was split or no split, K-8 or no K-8, middle school or junior high.
Well, I like kind of a blended approach. So maybe we can look at the pros and cons that we already did, but maybe we can focus it on, I mean, particularly because that's for 2 of the options have that right now. And if we look through all the pros and cons, and we can either say, yes, we're good with the split, or no, we're not good with the split. We could either eliminate 2 of them, or then maybe we agree that becomes an option with a sub option, and then we're discussing the merits of the K-8. Do you know what I mean? So just kind of within those, that's their similarities. But I think we've already done all the pros and cons, so I'd hate to just get into a hashing out of all the pros and cons without having it kind of led by what we've already done.
And Daniel,
Yeah.
I agree with what Kevin says, but I would like input from the town halls on that and what all the stakeholders think about the split. So I would really like to keep one of the options there for them, for stakeholders outside of this group to have their input on a split, because a lot of them have been here going back to when we had schools like that before, and they would have, I would imagine some people that have been around for a long time have an opinion of how that worked or didn't work that would be beneficial to us, since it was already done in Santa Paula.
And honestly, at the end of the day, right? The real purpose of today is to get to a point where we can start having conversations, right? If going through this process for a little bit, we decide we just really want to get feedback on those 3 questions, say, because I would like to see us show the variety, right? Unless we definitely say, like, what, we have to have a junior high. We shouldn't think of a middle school anymore. That's just the way that it should be. Okay, well then anything with a middle school option is off of the table, right? That's just a perhaps, right? If we think a split, no split, we should have options to show to get feedback. Well, that should influence the way that you vote for the options, right? If you think that we need K-8s and show an option for K-8s and not K-8s, that should influence which options that we want to present. So, I mean, and we could decide that, let's show all different flavors, right? There's the risk, right, that we're going to be going through too much, right? That we're not going to narrow it down enough. That's something that we need to consider, at least as a committee. So I'm flexible, right, on how we go about it. We could go ahead and start talking about split or no split. right now. There's two options, or there's two options that show that split, option 3 and option 5. So what do we think? Where do we want the conversation to go?
Daniel, I can't find the raise my hand button, but
Can't find it
Just-
either.
I think once you share the screen, I can't find it anymore. I don't know.
Mhm.
So I just,
Here,
now
let
I
me do
can
that.
find it, but I'm talking already. So one of the things I notice here, and really, right, what has led us down this road is the middle school, and something has to happen, right? It has to be redone somewhat somehow, because the building has been deemed we shouldn't be staying in it that much longer. When I look at these, I see a lot of PK6 options, and then I see junior high or middle school. So on the ones that are PK6, obviously those are junior high, and then there's one that's a PK5, it's a middle school. So to me, I look at it and I go, okay, and any of these scenarios, really except for number 3, the amount of kids that you would be putting on that junior high or middle school campus would be about the same, right? Because if it's the junior high, you're going to get all the 7th and the 8th graders. And if it's the middle school, you're also going to get some of the 6th graders, right? So if you lose some of the 7th and the 8th graders because of a K8, you might gain those from the 6th graders at the other sites. So in knowing that those 6th graders are likely going to be relocated because of construction that's going to happen at Isbell, is it possible that this strategic planning committee can look at a long-term approach and say, okay, well, we know for the next 3 to 5 years, while we're trying to construct a middle school or a junior high school, we're going to maybe have PK6s, right? And during that time that we're building that new structure or renovating the structure at the middle or the junior high school, that gives us a lot of time to see, one, how are the 6th graders doing at the elementary schools in the 1st or the 2nd year? And would that lead to, okay, now maybe we can expand it at 1 or 2 sites to 7th and 8th graders, or we have real data now that, maybe 6 is the max we want to go, or maybe we do want to say, like in option 7, let's dial it back to 5th grade and just make a couple sites that are K8. So I don't know if we could take this in steps and give us more time to get real data, because I think, and I could be wrong, that what is pressing us down this good road, I think, for a long-term solution in Santa Paula is the need to figure out something at the Isbell site. So I hope that made sense what I said. Just my thoughts right there. By looking at the choices that we chose.
I think it does. And before I say anything, since I've been somewhat dominating of the conversation, does anybody else have any reaction to that?
I could always weigh in on the data, when it comes to the enrollment. I think in looking at these options, so I think that all these options would reduce the number of students at Isbell, right? Whether we did it through bringing 6 just to the elementary schools, like say in option 1, that reduces it by a third because you're 1 less grade level. So, and then option 7 at the end reduces the size of Isbell because you have presumably 2 K8s. And so that's going to bring down the size of Isbell by, 400 students or so as well. And then my only concern would be with option 3. Because I feel when you start to do the enrollment math, it would leave Isbell, it's doubling up on taking students away from Isbell. So you're going to take the 6th graders away and you're going to do I still think that every time we've talked about K8s, we've talked about having it geographically balanced. So unless somebody else says that we would only do one, I would guess it's two. And so that would double up on pulling down the number of students at Isbell at the junior high there. And it would be a pretty significantly smaller school, maybe 400 to 500 students.
Well,
Which isn't, you know, that's just the business, the numbers of it. So programmatically, I don't weigh in on the merits of, you know, K6,
you know,
K5.
I think that, you know, Isbell being 400 to 500 students isn't a bad thing, right? You know, especially if we finally decide that, hey, we want new construction or, you know, we don't want to use the portables or what have you. You know, the capacity is higher because of those portables, right? And so if we reimagine the space, 400 to 500 might be ideal, right? So to me, it doesn't preclude us doing it. It just means that it would send us down a particular road when we're looking at facilities.
Yeah, and sorry, I know Jeff has his hand up there, but also I'm not sure if all of our elementaries can fit sixth grade right now. A lot of times when we talked about elementary going, or sixth graders going back to elementary, particularly Thiel and McKevitt are already pretty much filled. And so those might remain K5. So then we would have two K5s, two K6s, two K8s, and a junior high. So,
So
so it gets complicated.
Yeah, so I'm going to talk to, Mr. Weinstein, please.
So just, this is just information for everybody. So most likely, once the grade configurations are determined, we will take enrollment and look at every single grade and do what we have a program called Decision Insight that allows us to see where everybody lives and what schools they go to. And then there may need to be some adjustments of our boundaries of individual schools. So I don't want to, I don't think we need to worry about size of the schools. Basically, if we keep sixth graders at, you know, our elementary schools, most elementary schools would need at least two more classrooms to fill them. And Glen City would need 3 or 4 more classrooms just because of its size. And the only other thing I wanted to mention, just so that everybody has the same information. So right now, Isbell is at about 1,055 students. It was as high as 1,200 at one point, but declining enrollment, obviously it's down to 1,055. The most likely in all the scenarios that I looked at, you are going to have between 550 and 690 students in any of those scenarios. So we wouldn't go over 700 most likely, and we wouldn't go under 550. So you are kind of right in a wheelhouse there that for a junior high is pretty good, no matter what you guys decide. So I just wanted to give everybody that information so that as you guys are talking about it, you have it and you can use it in your discussion.
Okay, Ms. Stone.
Thank you. I just want to speak on, I did talk to my principal colleagues and I did weigh in with some staff about the possibilities, and they came up with some great points. But I just want to say, for Phil, if we're talking about dropping more classrooms, we already have more than we should have. We're already twice the size of the original school, and we have very little playground space. So it's kind of like an overcrowded jail situation. We have a lot, not that we're jail, but you know, when you have too many people in a small space, there's a lot of bumping into, you know, on the playground. We don't have enough physical space really to add more classrooms and then therefore add more students. Right now we have PE going on at the same time recess is going on, and there's very small amount of space for our kids to play safely. And the competition for the soccer field is a real thing here at Phil. So adding more classrooms, I think we would really need to study the physical plant before we make that decision. The other piece is Phil only has 1 student restroom for boys and 1 for girls. So we're adding 6th grade, and we keep TK here. That means we have TK and 6th graders in the same restroom at the same time. So those are some thoughts just that are specific to Phil, as you know, because I don't know how many people have been on the Phil campus, but it's a space is a real challenge here. And I know McKevitt has a very small playground space as well. So dropping more portables just cuts the playground space way, way, way down, and there's insufficient playground space as it is. Other thing I wanted to jump in on is that came up when I was speaking to some teachers is, you know, we're going with the literacy initiative, the TK, the K2 literacy initiative, and the PC33 math initiative. And the way these are divided up with PK through 3 and 4 to 6, it was suggested maybe third should go, it should be 3-6 because of that focus on early literacy with if we're even going down to preschool, pre-K, TK, kinder, first, second, to be a real focus with that early literacy initiative. And then 3-5, because grade 3 is part of that math initiative, and also is for vertical articulation among those grade levels that do participate in state assessments. It would tighten up that articulation if we have 3 through 6 rather than pre-K through 3. So those were just some points to think about. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Dr. Moore.
And the point that I wanted to make, you know, as we're thinking about making these changes, it is true, you know, we do have to deal with or address the issue of what needs to be done at Isbell, but we're also considering giving parents choices. And so that's something that we, because we know that our parents have choices, and we have parents who are making choices, and they're taking their students to schools outside of the district. And so the question is why? What is it that we're not offering? Is it grade configurations, right? Is it that? And if it is, then that needs to be a consideration that we're thinking about as we're moving forward.
Okay. Can we talk a little bit more about the splitting, right? You know, and how that might affect everything. So I went ahead and I put on option 3B and option 7B on our document, or on our, excuse me, our voting, all right? And so option 3B is just 3, right, with a PK5 split, right, and a middle school, as opposed to a PK6 split in junior high. Option 7B is a PK6 plus the K8s in a junior high, sorry. So, you know, I know that one of the things that has been concerning to me, right, is, or one of the things that we are considering, right, is what to do with 6th graders, right? You know, I know that from my own personal perspective, you know, 6th, 7th, 8th grade altogether always seemed like a terrible idea. You know, 7th and 8th graders are definitely a different breed, and then you're kind of bringing in the 6th grade, right? And so that's been one of the things that I've been kind of thinking about and trying to get, you know, get the right configuration. You know, that certainly has consequences. If you go back to the junior high model, then how do you, you know, configure the rest of elementary? So, you know, I would love to hear thoughts around that, because I think it's an important thing that we are, you know, grappling with.
Daniel, I do have a comment. You know, growing up through the school system here, Isbell's always been 7th and 8th. And then what was the reason for moving 6th graders into it years ago? Is there anybody who looked at that?
I have no idea. All right. Does anybody have any institutional memory of that decision?
Yeah,
I mean,
was it a
not
co-
even Chris, and Chris has been around for, God knows how many years, right?
Yeah, because I was looking at option 5 that we had here, and it's very similar to what we used to have here. Just the number of schools is a little different. We used to have 2, 4 through 6, and then 4 well, at that time K through 3. So it's very similar to what we had, but I just didn't know the reason why I mean, I never agreed with moving 6th graders in there as well, but I just didn't know what the reasoning for it was. If it was a cost cutting, or I don't know. So that's always been on my mind. So
It's been a long time because I've been in the district 29 years and it's been 6-8 since I've been here. So, but I know back when there was the old portal school and that the configurations were different, but I don't know that any of us have been here long, but back more 30 or more years before when it was.
It was still, so I graduated in 89. Oof, that's in 1989. I know that's still young for some people. But it was still a junior high when I left. I think it was shortly after that I left the school system that it was converted. So yeah. I have no idea what the reasoning was, what is the sense, right? Is that one of the quote unquote solutions to the Isabel problem? Oh, Mr. Weinstein, please.
So I just wanted to just make a comment, and I think all the administrators that are here will agree with me that if you've worked in multiple districts, it is common to find districts that have gone either way. They've added 6th grade to the middle school, or they've dropped 6th grade down to the elementary school. And 90% of the time or greater, it has to do with facilities and what it can hold. It's usually not educational programming that determines it. It's usually the facilities that determine, hey, we have a large blip of students coming up, and our facility is not going to handle it. So let's move the 6th graders, to the 7th and 8th and make it a middle school. So that probably, because we probably back then were in a growth mode, and that's probably one of the reasons that they looked at it.
yeah, because back then it was Blanchard and Barbara Webster were the 2 4th through 6th grade schools. So I don't know if at that time the capacity was at max capacity where they had to make that decision.
Mm-hmm. All right. We've talked a bit about the split, and we've talked a bit about junior, middle. Let's talk about K-8, because why not? Because that's another one of these where and again, I put up option 3B and 7B, right? How many options do we have up there now? 7 options, right? Or 6, excluding the status quo. 4 of those have the K-8s, and 2 don't.
Daniel,
So-
I don't have a hand to raise on there, so I just kind of have to butt in. I'm sorry. Getting back to where we started on the whole discussion was about losing enrollment to other schools, and a lot of parents who did not want to, in our district that still stayed, that did not want to send their child to Isabel. And so in order to meet the needs or wants of those parents, the idea of the K-8, one on the east side of town, one on the west side of town, came up so that those parents would have an option that they were happy with and would stay within our district. So again, it goes back to options.
Go ahead, Todd.
Is it possible, Jerry, that through what Daniel was saying is one of the things that made that opinion was, one, how large Isabel was, and two, the sixth graders being with the seventh and the eighth graders. And is it possible that making it a 7-8 would alleviate some of the concerns of those kids being together? I don't know, because I remember too talking, somebody said at the last meeting, we would have to look at the cost of busing, right? And if we make a K-8 and we're providing equitable services to everybody, then would we need to bus the students who wanted to go to the K-8? And conversely, would we have to bus the students who didn't want to go to the K-8, right? They would rather go to the K-6 or K-5 than go to the middle school. So I wonder if there's more than one way to skin a cat. And I've worked at Isabel for 23 years. And I love my job and I love being a part of that school. And clearly I look at it through a different lens than people who have never been there before. And I feel just like, Dr. Moore has come in here with his reimagined schools, right? And try to rebrand schools and try to make schools the best they can. And I appreciate that. And, is it possible through some of that, if we said, hey, we're going to make it a 7-8, we could make it, the image of it, and maybe with new construction too, right? We rebrand the image so people might want to stay. I don't know, right? Just a thought, right? I don't like, and I know nobody here is talking bad about Isabel, but I know sometimes it does get a bad rap, and I just know the amount of time and effort and work people in the district and people at the school have put into it. And I would just say that, we're surviving, and I don't think, to me, it maybe not be as much as a 6, 7, 8, but there is a lot of people at the middle school, right? And it's a lot to manage. So if we can find ways to solve the sixth graders not being with the seventh, eighth graders, and that reduces the size, we may have an opportunity to do some really exciting things and programs there on that campus.
Just one real quick response to that. I wouldn't have an answer, but that's why we're going with 3 different ones to put it out to stakeholders to see where people are. I mean, if we have 3 different options and we get a lot of feedback for junior high, that will help the board decide this is where our stakeholders want to go. This is where their interest is, etc. If there's a whole lot of input and interest in, not that people are going to be voting on it, but we're going to be hearing their comments on, yeah, we would love to have a K-8 here so we could make that decision for our family, that we would hear that and know that that would be a viable option. So in my feeling is I would love 3 kind of diverse scenarios for parents and stakeholders, community members, whatever, to have input on that will really give the board guidance on which way to go.
Hey, Todd, you still have your hand up, but
No, I can't find the button again to lower it. I'm sorry. I found it.
all right, Dr. Moore.
I just wanted to say, Board Member Mead, that Dr. Garcia actually did some research on the school configuration, and maybe I could share it with you, but maybe Dr. Garcia can share that, and it's pretty extensive on grade configurations. I know you were asking for that last time. But one of the things that I would add, and this comes from a little bit of my experience, I taught sixth grade for, I can't remember if it was 3 years or 4 years. As the years go by, you kind of lose track. I taught 3 or 4 years at the elementary level, sixth grade, and then I immediately went to another district and got a middle school position and taught sixth grade at middle school. And there is a distinct difference in the behavior of the students, because I had that experience back to back. If you and I always say, if you can hold on to the innocence of the elementary years for one additional year, I think it's good. And then when I taught sixth grade at middle school, I saw a huge difference in the behavior, because they were around seventh and eighth graders and sort of had to prove themselves a little bit. And so I did see right back to back what that difference was. And so I definitely am a proponent of putting sixth grade at elementary.
Again, in terms of trying to get us down to, options, right? A finite size, right? I think that, and helping the board trying to get to a decision, right? Certainly I would like to hear from the public about keep the middle school as it is, maybe reduce the population, or move it back to a junior high. I mean, that's a fundamental question. And I know my preference, right, is for junior high, right? But I don't know if that's the right call. The other question again, right, K-8s or no K-8s, right? 2 K-8s, no K-8s. None of us want all K-8s, right? That's a fundamental question. I want to hear from the parents, right? We'll help frame the debate for them. We'll list the pros and cons, right? We'll get the feedback from as many people as possible so that the information is there, and to get the input from teachers and staff, right? Because they're the ones that are going to be implementing this. And then again, I'm still a bit torn about splitting up, the residual elementary, right? If you say you go junior high, do we have all the room for, P6s, or do we have to split them up? So, Hilda, please.
Hi, I just wanted to kind of piggyback on what Todd had said. My views is very similar. I think we really need to look into, we really need to consider the fact that currently our sixth graders are pretty much in a different area than the seventh and eighth. And it was because that's what the parents had requested a while back ago. And so they are kind of separate. I'm not going to say isolated, but they are kind of separate in their own side of the school. And so their breaks and lunches are not with seventh and eighth. And that was because that's what the parents had requested. Coming from an elementary, I worked at an elementary for 15 years. I've been here 6 years. I've always felt that the sixth graders here don't really, when they were with seventh and eighth, it was like they didn't really fit in with the seventh or the eighth. And they were trying really, really hard to fit in with either one grade or the other, but just wouldn't. So I would be a supporter of just keeping seventh and eighth here. And I think we need to really look at what we have now. And that was because that's what the parents wanted. They didn't want their sixth graders with seventh and eighth grade. That's it.
Okay, thank you. Mark.
Just sort of piggybacking on the same points, I wanted to talk about the difference from sixth to seventh and eighth grades. Most sixth grade teachers still, of course, have multiple subjects, and they can teach 2 or more classes to their same sets of students. Whereas seventh and eighth grade teachers have a single subject, they're more of an expert in one area. I imagine if you had a K-8 school, depending on the size of the enrollment, one teacher would teach, say, history, would teach both the seventh graders and the eighth graders of the history class. And if there's an additional class period, they would teach an elective of some kind. The challenge or the concern that I have is that when we have our one middle school with Santa Paula, we're able to make all of the resources and programs at middle school and focus those here. And I know we have had difficulties at times replacing our experts in a field. For example, we had a great robotics teacher who was here for a couple of years and recently left, and we've not been able to replace that. If we have multiple sites offering middle school programs, I just would be concerned about having enough specialists to offer those same level of programs. I also would be concerned about breaking up some of the successful elements at Isbell. Our band in particular is a very accomplished and well-known band. And if we diffuse it to K-8s or to other sites, I'm just not sure when or if they would be able to play together and sort of how that would work. So those are just some points I wanted to raise about that. Thank you.
Sure. Mary.
Good points, Mark. I just wanted to say, based on speaking with my colleagues and some staff, that, you know, I also have taught sixth grade at a K-6 school, and I think, you know, I understand what you're saying about the specialists and so on, but I think that the sixth graders, and you, with, if you have one teacher, we can hold on to them a little longer and help get them ready for that transition. I think, and when I look at our students here at our school, and I just worry that they're just, some of them are not mature really to go into that bigger school setting and manage all that, as much as we try to get them ready. So there was a lot of positive input about having K-6 schools. So I just want to say, in my earlier input, I'm not against that, but we also seriously need to look at the size of certain campuses. And then just a plus to having some K-8s is, you know, for programs like dual language immersion, we have that opportunity for that continuity all throughout. And that's you know, unless that's going to be offered then at a middle school level, or some way to continue into the middle or junior high, that K-8 experience for that program might be a good thing to consider going forward.
Okay. Liz.
So I did put the link to some of the research into the chat. And I see that some of you are on it. And generally, I mean, just to summarize, this is just a sliver of the research that's out there. But I think one thing that I saw as I was going through it is that the research seems to be inconclusive, right? So you'll find research on both sides of this grade configuration issue. I know the very first article there, and I can just share my screen quickly. Thank you.
Sure.
Let's see here. Actually, hold on one second here. So here you can see on the very first item, it does talk about like K-8 schools and how, you know, students in grade 6 or 7 do experience a sharp decrease in learning trajectories. And I just took quotes from within the research article itself, just to help everyone to at least see a little snapshot of what some of the outcomes were from that particular piece of research. So I think this would be, you know, it's helpful to go in and just see like what were the parameters of the research itself. For this first one, they were looking at New York City and Florida and doing a large statistical analysis across a database, whereas, you know, the parameters were different in the other research articles. So I think, you know, it's important to, you know, look at and consider consistency across grade levels. I am a proponent of the options, and the reason I'm a proponent is just based on at least, you know, some of the stakeholder feedback that is coming in, and especially looking at wanting to have parents or give parents options. It seems like having a K-8 solution is going to help us compete, you know, with you know, MUPU and or Briggs, and making sure that parents do have that option. And so that was one of the elements that I thought of when I was looking at voting for the different options, is the multitude of options and which set of options provided that choice.
Okay. All right. I'm gonna, you know, wrap up discussion here. Right. I'm gonna ask a question, you know, and so first thing I'm gonna do is just share my screen again. There are 7 options on the board. Status quo, you know, variations of junior high, middle, variations of K-8, variations of split, no split. Do we feel right now that we can vote, right? That you could pick the three that you think that we should give consideration on, whatever your criteria are, whether you think we should always have a K-8 has to be there, or whether you think we should be presenting options, right? Different types of configurations. Do we feel like we can make that vote right now? I'm pushing us to. Unless there's any objections to that, strong objections, I think we should go ahead and take, a few minutes to do one more vote, right, on the options that are there. And let's see what we come up with. Maybe there's a consensus on 3 options that we can present, right, and explore further. So this doesn't mean that any one of those is going to be it, right? But we need to finalize this, or whittle it down.
How many are we just going down to 1 or 2?
No, I still think, 3, because I do think that having 3 options to present is a smart thing. So which 3 would you present if you had the choice?
'Cause in the
Daniel,
end,
can
we're-
you put it back up on the screen again?
So we're voting on the ones that were
Sure.
left from last time, correct? Or all 7 again?
Yes. Nope. The
That's
ones
fine.
that were left.
On tab 2 on the
Yep.
bottom, you have to go
Right, I
down
got
to,
it.
sorry,
But I
second.
thought when I saw him put it up, it was all the options earlier. So I was just double checking. So how many votes do we get?
3.
And so Daniel, I mean, in the end, we're trying to walk away with 3 options to take to the general public and have other discussions about, right? So,
Yes.
because I was thinking having 2 votes might help us spread
Let's
less.
see. Let's see what 3 gets us. And
Yeah,
if there's no consensus, then we can revote.
yeah.
Can you quickly tell me what 3B and 7B were so I can write it down?
So
Right.
3B is middle school, right? 2 K-8s, and then the rest are split between PK5, right, in some fashion,
Okay,
right? And then option 7B is all PK8s, PK6s, excuse me, 2 K-8s, 1 junior high.
all right, so 3B was 7th and 8th, 2 K-8s, and there would be 2 PK3, let's say, and 2 4, 6.
Oh, that one's not a split.
Not a split. So the rest, so it's a 7, 8, 2 K-8s, and 4
Yeah,
PK through what, 5 or 6?
through 6.
Okay. And that was 3B, right?
Yes,
Thank you for clarifying.
sure.
Dr. Sandoval, just
Yes.
make sure all of your cell functions are adding or including the right cells.
Yes, I see that now. There we go. Jerry, if you'd like to text me.
Yep.
Hey, Kevin,
Yeah,
how about entering mine again, because
Yeah.
I'm not able to get in here.
okay, which ones do you want?
5 and 7.
You get one more if you'd like.
1,
Option
1, 5, and 7.
Okay, 1, 5, and 7. 1, 5, 7. You're good.
Daniel,
Yes,
just put me down for 3 and 7B.
3 and 7B.
I think our let's
Chris, are you in there to vote? Is she still on?
I just sent you an email, Dr. Sandoval, because I don't have access to this.
Ah,
So
okay.
can I go ahead and give you my vote?
Oh, yeah, I got your email. So I'll go
Okay,
ahead
thank
and
you.
I'll put that in.
Thank you.
3.
Were you asking me, Daniel?
No, sorry, wrong Chris.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Christina.
Again, Dan, what's the main difference oh, I see, middle school and junior high. I see, 7 and 7B.
Yeah, that's the difference between the two. So,
Oh, excuse me, so
Liz.
I want to change my vote. I
Oh, all mine got erased, so hold on.
like the 7B,
As opposed to,
just straight 7.
okay. Does anybody want the status quo? I mean, no one has voted for the status quo this round.
I
All
mean,
right.
I'll just say for me, Daniel, as somebody who works there, right? Like, I guess I understand that there's things that are going to be going on, right? With what has to happen to Isabel.
Mhm.
And there's not a realistic way at this point for at least 5 years, probably after this next year, to have 6th graders there. So that gives us the opportunity to go to the junior high model for some time, right? So to
Mhm.
me, like, I don't think it's a bad school, but I think if we're reimagining things, like, I didn't vote for it this go around. Not because I don't think it's a viable option, but just because of space, I don't think it's a viable option at this time, if that makes sense.
No, I think that makes sense. Right. I think that makes sense. Okay, so everybody has voted all the votes that they wanted to submit. And let's do a kind of gut check, right? Because we have option 1, P6s in a junior high, right? No K8s. Option 5, PKs are split. All right, PK6s are split, and we have a junior high. All right, and then what I would say is kind of a up in the air, right? You know, it's either, 2 K8s and the middle and PK5s, or a junior high and PK6. I'm not. And again, I want to see where we're all at. I'm not sure if that's a big enough difference of a vote, right? It seems like just a kind of spin on the same flavor, right? For me to say, well, we're gonna that we should eliminate option 7 because we shouldn't consider that at all, right? In some ways, right? And I'm gonna just throw this out there. If we went with these 4 options, right, they're, I think, very specific. I know we wanted to get to 3. It would have been great to get to 2, but honestly, I feel like, we need to ask, right? Middle school or junior high, 2 K8s or none, split or none, right? Get our feedback on those 3 questions that are framed in each of those 4 options, right? And then we go and we look at it, and then we have a decision to make. All right. Do we feel like that's a viable way of going forward? Do we need to narrow it down to just 3? What's there's multiple questions in there, and people can't. What's the head?
I think we could potentially go with these 4. I think I agree with you. And maybe with some, I'm gonna say professional help, we can organize a well thought out survey for the public that that asks them between these 4 options, which ones do they like, and then why, so if you ask them to similarly do some exercise that's going to help us score which ones, but then maybe some follow-up questions as to why they did or didn't want to split grade levels, or why they do or do not want K-8s. Then we have a little bit of follow-up so that if we get some nonsensical voting up top, we have a little bit of follow-up on specific questions for the community about splitting in K-8s.
So
middle school too. Like maybe those
I'm-
are the 3 key questions. So we kind of have 2 layers of information from the public.
I think that sounds reasonable, but I will add that, I know as a board member, I don't want to rely just on surveys. Maybe that's the first thing that we do, but I really do want to have like in-person town halls where people can ask questions. And, this really should be for not just parents, right? Not just students, right? But for the whole community and for staff and for teachers and administrators. This is one kind of like we did the superintendent search. It's a huge decision. We want to make sure we get the right person. I think that process was a model on which we can make decisions. Because I think, and I'll pump up Jeff, we've made a great decision, right? And I think that following that same sort of spirit will get us to the right answer. It's never going to solve everything. Of course, this isn't the end point, right? Then we go on to, educational programming. But this is something that we have to make the decision, and we have to make it soon because other things rely upon this decision that need to be decided upon itself. So Jerry, I don't know if you want to make a comment as a, reigning board member and, queen of SPU, SD.
No, I agree. Oh, I think Lorenzo wants to say something.
No,
I think he stepped away.
Oh, okay. I agree with what Daniel said. Even if, when you said surveys, Kevin, what I pictured was kind of a double. I would like people at the town halls to have a discussion, hear their input, and have an English and Spanish survey right there for them after they hear other people talk, other parents, other stakeholders talk. So I'd kind of like to see that done in 2 different ways to get the input on paper or however.
We could bring a set of Chromebooks and have people do it right there.
Have it do it there real quick. I would like to see both, and I wouldn't mind having the 4, especially if we were talking about getting feedback on those 3 main questions that we've gone over. I think that would really help the board decide the final decision on what they hear and what they see on the survey and what they've heard from community members that might not show up.
So because we're finalizing here, it's 3:30, right? And I want to respect everybody's time, right? Does anybody else have any comments on the process that we're going to take over the next several weeks?
I think it's great. I just think it would be, like Kevin said, somebody to write some good questions to make sure we capture what we really want, and I know some of the things like Jerry has brought up, well, are we losing people? But I think on the flip side, we've talked about, well, how many kids would want their 6th grader to middle school, right? So maybe we see, okay, going the junior high path is something that we should do because we've seen that, right? Even though we've kind of all just in our votes have kind of thought that that might be a good change to make, but we also may want to ask how many parents would want sixth graders at an elementary school, right? We have to ask it the other way too. And how many parents would want a seventh and an eighth grader at an elementary school? Because you hear from them one time, and if our argument is not to have sixth graders with seventh and eighth graders, but then we want to make K-8s, can we flip the arguments and say, okay, we didn't want sixth graders with seventh and eighth graders, but now we're going to put kindergartners and first graders with them. So those are the things that I think we need to look at. I do think it's been a great process so far, and not that I want to give your ego any boost, but I think you did a good job today of laying things out, and I think everybody's opinion was awesome. So thank you for the good meeting.
So this is what I'm going to suggest. I'm going to ignore that comment, right? But thank you. You know, I will work with administration, right, to lay out a process for feedback, right, that we will embark on at great haste. You know I want to be done with this by the end of the month, right? All of the feedback, everybody knows what's going on. Anybody who has their 2 cents to put in, they do, all right? Because I think the board needs to make the decision by the beginning of March, right? Maybe that's ambitious, right? But I think we can do it. And I think, you know, we should be open as a committee to help make that happen. You know, this is a community effort, I feel, right, to get it right. And so, you know, let's assume that we're meeting in 2 weeks, right, on the 16th. But, you know, that doesn't mean that there's not going to be a tremendous amount of activity, you know, between now and then. I think the way that we worked with, you know, the grade configuration document, that people could put in comments as they wanted to, you know, was a good method of communication and getting ideas out there. I do want to let you all know again, right, you know, there were some great ideas in there that we couldn't touch on today, right? But we will revisit those as a committee, because there was a lot of important things in here. But to get ourselves done, right, to get moving forward, you know, I think we'll essentially go with these four options, right, to present, framed with those 3 questions, right? We'll develop a way in which we are going to solicit that input. We will let you all know every step of the way what we're thinking of, right? And get your impact. I see an account. Does that include community town hall meetings? Absolutely, right? The other educational institutions are not getting proper community outreach and notes for public input. So, you know, we will be reaching out to, you know, all of our collaborative partners, right? That's the idea, right? So, you know, again, we'll put a plan together to share with everybody to make sure that we're all on the same page. But other than that, unless there are any other comments from the committee, any last minute? If not, then I'll adjourn this meeting at 3:35 p.m. Next meeting will be tentatively scheduled for 2/16. All right. Thank you, everybody.